Waiting in A&E, Gregory opened Twitter, clicked on the firm's feed. A good ally is somebody who looks out for you when you're not there. Somebody who challenges biases, racism and ignorance. #inclusivity. He thought about the beginning of his career at the firm. 15 years ago, one of 100 new starters crammed onto a coach bound for induction in Daventry, where, on arrival, the image consultant had stared at his hooped earring, cleared her throat and inquired if he'd read the corporate dress policy. And a few weeks later, lounging in the hotel bar after a late finish on his second ever audit, when the inebriated supervisor divulged that he was providing regular feedback on Gregory's performance to senior management. The firm isn't sure you're cut out for this, the supervisor had said. So Gregory changed, ditching the earring, the skinny ties, the tight-fitting waistcoats. He abandoned the funky fringe, settling for a short back and sides every 4 weeks. No more absconding from department socials at 10 p.m. to sneak off to gay clubs down Her Street. He became the last one standing, the first to put his hand in his pocket. Drawing back his shoulders, he forced himself to stand tall, to stop slouching, instead mimicking the poise of the private schoolers, their bodies pulled up straight as if by an imaginary wire. His back ached at first, but he treated himself to a weekly massage until, eventually, it became habitual. And he shaved every single day, even though it gave him a dotty red rash all over his neck. Look at me now, he thought, a director on track to become a partner, living proof that anyone can succeed at the firm, a true meritocracy. He hit retweet.
What I need to tell you is that anyone can look threatening, even you. And I know the work is lonely and your feet hurt, but at least it's something. It gets you out the house. Just smile with your eyes, and although the mask will make it difficult to connect, and you'll need to stand well back once you've rung the bell, you should keep your voice kind and bright, not too high at the end of your sentences, or too squeaky. Remember what your boss said about body language. Open, friendly. Hello there, our records show you haven't filled out your... What I need to tell you is that I know that the device hanging round your neck keeps glitching and the cord attached to it is rubbing against your worry mole. And that despite rebooting the system, your field caseload is not in logical order, so that when you come down from calling at the 10th floor of Phoenix House, it's highly likely it will send you straight back up again. Just take it slowly. Don't rush yourself. Make sure your lone working app, SafeMate, is on Amber Alert and that you enter your password quickly when it vibrates. Write it down on a scrap of paper and put it somewhere you won't lose it. You know what you can get like under pressure.
Mahmoud pushes away the heavy blanket, his heart thumping hard. He stares into the dark, listening for the rattle of gunfire. Slowly his nightmare recedes. Panicky old fool. The radio newsreader was calm yesterday, announcing the curfew, a safety precaution due to planned military action. He mentioned rebel forces, a distant town. Mahmoud pictured smoking rubble and dazed, crying children, and felt the familiar, weary anger. After 10 years, the world's attention has moved on to other wars and a new, invisible enemy that can't be bombed or shot. Yet in the ruins of his country, the big players and their proxies still slug it out. Mahmoud can no longer count the relatives and friends he's lost. Somehow, his own small family has survived. Life goes on. His back aches from the thin mattress. No more sleep for him. Does the president lie awake at night? Mahmoud met the young man once at a palace function shortly after he had succeeded his wily old father. The reluctant heir was tall, his handshakes soft. He promised a new beginning. He spoke with a lisp. Mahmoud takes his torch and sweeps the beam over the stone walls. He pictures the slaves who dug this room out of the palace foundations centuries ago. Anonymous men conquered in battle. Did they still believe in what they had fought for? Or were they just glad to be alive? They left no ancient graffiti. He imagines leaving his own. Mahmoud Hassan, 25th of March, 2021. The stone is rough, cool. He could no sooner deface it than knife his own heart.
This poem is Death Archive. I learned how to make room for death. From my mother, she slept with the dead. Underneath her mattress, funeral programs of grandparents, aunts, and uncles swept up by diabetes, cancer, and asthma. Changing sheets and lifting her mattress was a mausoleum opening. I did the same for my friends who I lost. Mommy, irritated. You see how pitney and grateful? Remember say your family are the one them with it clean your dirty body and feed you. But it was my friends who kept me from roaming the streets like an empty soda bottle. Maybe I do have something against life. My death began slow. At the first funeral I attended, I knew the meaning of death before I knew the meaning of death. The next time it came around, I reserved August 25th for my own. Double-checked it wasn't anyone's birthday, public or bank holiday. Razors slid smooth across my wrists like lotion. At the train station, I hoped for a hooded commuter's push. Whenever I started loving myself again but had a bad day or month, I had to wait for August 25th to return. Wondered if my friends thought I was ungrateful.
Remodeling. I've been taken down to the studs once before. I've been gutted. I have a set of brand new nipples that would make John Ruskin blush. I'm standing outside a brick colonial, its entry flat-faced and formal, pointing to what soon will take down and what a little later will go up. I gesture vertically to mean columns and a portico. My hands make a suitable roof. And what about the maple? The clients ask. The home rises gray above us. I'm hairless as a Gothic statue and chilled against the weather. When we build, says Ruskin, let us think that we build forever. Ruskin, afraid of the body, afraid of his wife. I put my body in the air before me like a castle. 2 new breasts, a stand of shrinking lesions, my skin stretching pink and into ribbons. Inside, we turn to what and how much we can reuse. Wood floors, balusters, trim and dentals. My hands arch to mean a doorway. They lift to mean a ceiling. Soon, even the body turns to peacocks and lilies.
Rainforest in Winter. It starts with an epigraph from Charles Wright, which reads, I used to imagine that language could lead us inextricably to grace, as though it were geographical. I used to think these things when I was young. I still do. Today, the wind has set in like dew that won't dry. bone deep and damp with all the world's worry. It blows hard, midnight cold at midday. The boys don't feel it though. Their bare legs barrel the grass along the sloped bank of Kalon Creek. The water below runs winter's way. Dark funnels in the eddies, slow and glacial among the rushes. Autumn's in the ground, and our gumboots tell the season, thick with mud and mush, moss and wood fibres from a fallen branch of blueskin wattle. We're out of the house, for now. The breeze beats our oilskin jackets like old boxers' gloves, and we walk punch-drunk down the sloughed edge of the path, the dirt slippery like sweat-covered canvas. But there's nothing more determined than two boys on the loose, and I'm the kite they carry and flit in each draught, scribbling their whim across the remnant paddocks. The weeping grass bends to our knees and falls, uneven in tufts, like a mind bowed low by life. Animal trails scrawled with time's unsteady hand. The slow migration of dairy cows that once sheltered under the blackwoods and peppermints. A little raven stalks us through the branches like a bag of all my mistakes. The car of his call forming hieroglyphs of sound. I'm pulled on. I leave the stones to the river, rosettas of algae and lichen. Interpretation is patience. But my two are having none of it in the flush of July air that ripens our faces and tears the tops of ribbon gums to shreds.
Richie met Athena Righteous Fury on the same day the tower block where she lived got up and started walking. Richie was scooping his hangovered behind out of an acquaintance's yard after a night of group drinking. The lift was dead. Last night it had seemed hysterically funny getting up to floor 29, like climbing a concertina. When they finally arrived, gasping, strung out in the corridor like paper bird decorations in the wind, looking at the stars, Richie saw he was too drunk to get down again. It was a distinct tremor in the concrete that had woken him, but he'd only realized that later, confusing the tremor with a need to urinate. He slipped out the shaking front door, leaving a snoring crowd splayed amongst Rizzlers and pint glasses. Richie didn't notice the fluorescent blue liquid running down the tower block walls, hissing and fizzing. He slunk down the corridor. Didn't tower blocks usually sway in the wind? A woman 3 doors down flung open her door and walked out, orange robe flailing. Richie would have skipped on by but for the transparency of the woman's nightdress, exposing prodigious breasts and a bigger belly. She was the largest person he'd ever seen, like marshmallow foam, beautiful eyes wide and head cocked. There was no way to get past her without full body contact, and he was sure that would be like a hurricane, swept up into trouble. "You feel that?" asked the woman. "What?" said Richie. Her reply was drowned out by a yawning, squealing metal sound, like all the cutlery in the world scraped against corrugated iron, and a sudden, meaty stench as if they'd been rammed face first into a butcher's shop. The tower block began to move forward.
Sweets boy. Leona called from the agency, saying that an incredible opportunity had opened up. There could be no more procrastinating, and she kept repeating my name as she spoke, Timothy, Timothy, fearing my attention would slip. Mother watching me from across the kitchen, wiping the same sweep of counter 5 times, 10 times. Leona, Leona, I echoed for reassurance. And so she continued, saying that Prince had called her, Prince the musician, his baritone voice unmistakable, asking her if she could recommend a young man to serve at his mansion in Chanhassen as a duster, someone skilled in the use of Swiffers, damp cloths, brooms, dustpans. Ridiculous though it might seem, particles of dust were wreaking havoc on his creative process, and Leona did not hesitate or question him. Instead, she asked immediately if this would be a full-time position, and he said yes, permanent and full-time, starting at twice the minimum wage, but the job was no cakewalk. The household was imposing, 65,000 square feet, at which point Leona said, crossing her fingers, that she had the perfect candidate, Timothy Adams, 19, on self-imposed hiatus from the University of Minnesota despite a brilliant academic record, presently conflicted by an anxiety disorder, but hard-working, honest, and she could have him at Prince's door at 7:30. Just say the word. And rather than haggle, Prince agreed. The arrangement was made. I was to report to Prince's mansion at 7:30 the next morning. Leona would fax the details, and she reminded me that I would be representing the agency, that before meeting Prince, I should familiarize myself with the passage from Genesis, dust will return to the earth as it was. And although she was fond of me, fondness had limits, she said, advice that I bashfully received, thanking her, hanging up. And there was Mother still polishing the counter, vigorously.
She had been sick for a long time, and he had begun to think she would not get better. At the beginning of her illness, he had not allowed himself to think like that, but then things began to get worse. He wanted to talk about things with her, but it was hard to talk about. She didn't want to talk. She had always wanted to talk about things, and he never had, and now she was dying, she hardly wanted to talk about anything at all. He scaled back on work. He felt like a good carer, and like he was doing right by her. Often, the visiting nurse would tell him what a good job he was doing. Once he'd been chaotic and disorganized, but now he was meticulous and clear-headed. Now he knew what medication she should take and at what time, what day to change her sheets, when to bathe her, when she might need the toilet. When he tried to talk to her, she turned away, or switched on a show, or fell asleep. She was asleep a lot of the time now, but sometimes he thought it was tactical, and her resistance made him smile. She said she wasn't afraid to die. He didn't believe this. He didn't believe she wasn't afraid, but then, how could he say this to her? He wondered if she hated him for outlasting her. The visiting nurse talked about a hospice, but he wanted to care for her in their home. One day, out of nowhere, the nurse said they were maybe looking at 2 weeks. She said she wouldn't come back. I won't come back, she said, unless you need me. The nurse opened out her arms and he let her hold him, although he felt nothing and he knew she was disappointed. She gave him a booklet about the end of life. He didn't read it.
Notes on the dead. I hand him a clean tissue and water bottle to wipe off the dust and grass cuttings from the polished granite. We come ill-prepared, from a 1 in 3 hike straight up the valley wall, barely coaxed down the zip-wire path. Now I anchor at the graveside, as if about to say grace. Old man, your son cannot be still. He is off, down the rows, is restlessly calling out the stone register of your friends. I note the ground has levelled. The grave is merry with grass. Has the poor soil tomb collapsed? Does a corpse need to tuck in warm earth to replace the soft body so soon? We all pause around his imaginary length, see the funeral buffet, still cling-filmed, when a slight figure who was facelessly scything the vacant lots to hay appears quietly. Talk turns to the clough, the track we climbed, tarmacked for $500,000, making it the steepest road in Britain. This conversation really is your father's natural terrain. I am sure he will take it further. Did the muffled laughter confuse those in the garden at Golgotha? Dogs are maddened by the smell of the dead. I regret not planting a rose, then withdraw regret as I notice I'm stroking the grave, scythe slow. May they grow stronger after every cut, the ghosts living in the grass.
Agustina during the last week of October. I'm sent an email of another failing grade the day of my youngest sister's fourth attempt to kill herself. The first occurrence of sadness in a year or so. Thankfully, she failed, taking capsules long acting enough that the emergency room could still administer life saving doses of charcoal. I'm 27 kilometers away working in another hospital when mother breaks the news. My baby sister saved from kidney failure, and don't ever make the mistake of telling anyone because they will think we are crazy. I stopped believing in God when I was 10. My father driving full speed and spiked windows rolled down, his voice cursing the good Lord our Savior, Jesus Christ, all the way to the heavens. Unfortunately, God's feet on prayer. My mother never stopped pulling me to church on Sundays. The many-armed, many-eyed God of my great-grandfather sighs another prophecy from the muddy waters of the Ganges. Another serpent gnaws the moon in its jaws. Another relic unearthed in gray sand promises miracles for thousands of years. Another shrapnel of loneliness blooms in someone else's damp heart. And after resecting another tumor, we inform the patient's relative, and he is brought to his knees by tears and all endearments for the Lord our God, how he works in ways in us, etc. Elsewhere, turtles topple over in space. Stars dance like bullets. A holy hedgehog drops quills into the mouth of a black hole. A wayward missive rises to the heavens, but is melted by the quiet coming of rain. A god's teeth grow sharp like faith, edges smooth as deliverance offered by knives. And tell me, what do you believe? Suerte. Born around poverty but not in it, I am called fortunate. Suerte. Educated but not bright enough to be a scholar. Rooted in the motherland but not morena enough to warrant standard sympathies. Suerteng mestiza. Hardship is measured by the shade of your skin, by how many vowels in your surname remains of your ancestors. I am expected to migrate overseas because that's what Filipinos are bred for in the 21st century, says the gospel according to the internet. I made a mistake picking to be a doctor instead of a nurse or someone's wife, so that meant everything became 10 times harder and more expensive. Good fortune is in your palms if you just work hard, but this trick only works had your family agreed to deal with politicians when the opportunity was fresh as a pearl. Napakaswerte. The hectares of land my forefathers farmed, now consumed by warring relatives. The shape of their greed, a map I've memorized in the dome of my pale skull. My father almost pawned off my education in place of the latest Mercedes-Benz when I was 5. My people are born to be subservient. And those who dared fight the galleons in those early centuries were either charred into clumps of ash like their anitos or maimed with Christian names. I was named after a flower that meant joy, and really, I do not mean to be this unhappy. What I mean to say is, I bear no ills for being born in these isles. My name is a constellation of defiant letters, offering mouthfuls for tongues to wrestle with. And I don't regret the witchcraft swimming in my veins. I can name the makings of a body good enough as any surgeon. These small hands have resected and sewn organs. These eyes have seen people impaled with arrows and live. Miracles, madness, sobrang suerte naman. But you know things are bad when they exhumed a dead dictator's remains and re-implanted it where we laid our heroes to rest. Learn to move on, they echo through faceless screens, calling evidence of human torture fake news. Roomfuls of data discredited by TikTok and vloggers, an archipelago splintered by algorithms and hunger, sold off to foreign buyers a single island at a time. And when they decided to erase the faces of the heroes in our currency and replace it with a cute eagle nearing extinction, when they required face shields and curfews to combat a virus while hospitals swelled up like obstructed bowels, healthcare workers who choose to remain are told how lucky we are, underpaid but alive, lucky to breathe the poisoned air, to walk the hard earth our gods no longer recognize. Resilience, the national talisman used again and again, its edges blunt and dull, its sides stained with too much blood to clean. Napakaswerte.
This is Caesarean Pantoum. I wear the hospital's gown in my home, a ghost drifting from bed to toilet bowl, the hours diagrammed in monochrome, like at the clinic I toured back in Seoul. Its ghost drifting from beds to toilet bowls, its bleach blasting meconium and piss out of the clinic I toured back in Seoul, where dead were carved from gashes, kissed, then bleach blasted of meconium and piss, and swaddled in the arms of the mothers, almost dead, all carved, all gashed, who kissed for the first time their most other others. Swaddled in the arms of the mothers, the dead looked live as magpies, glittered eyes. For the last time, these most other others were weighed, quietly, the mothers immortized. The dead, the magpies, the glittered eyes looked at me, my notebook wadding in pills. I caved. Like the mothers, I immortized the others. To write off costs is a skill I practice in my notebook. My gown, my pills, my hours diagrammed in monochrome. My others. To write off costs is to kill. I wear the hospital's gown in my home.